Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has described Sunday's parliamentary elections as a historic effort. The 7th Cuba-Caricom Summit of Heads of State and Government, held via video conference, closed this Tuesday. The opposition in Armenia announced Tuesday that it had begun a campaign of peaceful civil disobedience, demanding the Prime Minister resign. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro held a press conference with international media this Tuesday, during which he addressed the recent parliamentary elections. Maduro described the electoral participation of the Venezuelan people as a historical effort in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and the escalation of the economic, financial and commercial warfare of the United States against the country. The president highlighted the victory of the revolutionary forces, which guarantees the recovery of the parliament in a peaceful and democratic manner. In response to questions from the media, President Maduro stressed that Venezuela has very good relations with the United States as a country and as a society, but has been unable to establish a respectful relationship with the current government, noting that there was better dialogue under the Obama administration before it decreed Venezuela a threat to U.S. national security. Maduro also noted his willingness to work towards a dialogue between the two countries following the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden.
We have achieved the goal to peacefully recover the National Assembly through the popular vote. Today, December 8, 2020, I can say that a new National Assembly has been born in Venezuela by mandate of the Constitution and in full compliance with the country's legal system, and in the only way a National Assembly can be chosen for its subsequent mandates, through the vote of the people. The Venezuelan people chose a new National Assembly through their votes in a legal, constitutional way and following the legal framework, which will rule and govern our country for the next 5 years, from 2021 to 2026.
And the Venezuelan president announced a plan to assassinate him during the parliamentary elections, which was sponsored by the government of Colombia.
I changed my polling station, as any Venezuelan who wants to can change his or her polling station. I requested the change of polling station because through a very reliable Colombian intelligence source, we received information that they were preparing an attempt to assassinate me on election day during a live broadcast. We conducted the investigations, and my security team made a decision to recommend this change of the polling station because it was a fixed day in a fixed place, and Iván Duque participated in the plans to kill me on election day from the Nariño presidential palace.
And President Maduro pointed out that Venezuela is in the midst of a multifactorial war that it aims to prevent the creation of an alternative model to neoliberalism.
Venezuela is in the spotlight, at the epicenter of the global debate. The world's empires have tried to recolonize our country because they are waging a multifactorial, unconventional war to prevent Venezuela's development, its definite consolidation, because it has already risen up to prevent the development of an alternative model to dominant capitalism, neoliberalism, dominant neocolonialism, to prevent the appearance of a model of an independent nation building a new social model, socialism of the 21st century.
In an exclusive interview with teleSUR, former President of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, described the Venezuelan electoral process of December 6 as a resounding success.
Yesterday's elections were impeccable. They were too calm. I would even say boring because everything was going very well. It took a few seconds for people to vote, which helped with biosecurity, and well, I think it was a total success, because we know the immense obstacles that the members of the National Electoral Council had to overcome in a very short time in order to comply with the Constitution and have the parliamentary elections on December 6th.
More than 150 international observers included in the National and International Observation Plan for Venezuela's parliamentary elections read out the final report on the process, which was described as legitimate and of total respect for the country's constitution.
The various groups of observers who visited various voting centers in the city of Caracas, surrounding cities and states in the interior of the country were beyond some delays caused by the pandemic situation affecting the world. The elections began in time and formed with designated authorities, and most of the establishment were present prosecutors from the different political forces participating in the elections.
The president of the National Electoral Council of Venezuela, Indira Alfonso, offered the second official bulletin on the results of the parliamentary elections held on December 6.
At this time, we must inform that we have processed 98.63% of the vote tally sheets and a turnout of 30.50% of registered voters, totaling 6,251,080 valid votes cast in this election, distributed in the following way.
The 7th Cuba-Caribbean Community Summit of Heads of State and Government sessioned this Tuesday and was closed by Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel and CARICOM Chairman and Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves. The event was held in a video conference format due to the coronavirus pandemic and allowed member states to establish strategies to address the health crisis that has hit the region hard. Leaders of Caribbean Community member states noted that they will continue to work together to assess the economic crisis, climate change and development strategies. They also reiterated their rejection of the US blockade against Cuba. The event coincided with the 48th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Cuba and Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados and Jamaica. The National Electoral Council of Ecuador has approved the candidacies of presidential running mates Andrés Arauz and Carlos Rabascal, representing the Union for Hope coalition. The president of the Electoral Council, Diana Atamant, informed that with this decision, there are now a total of 16 pairs of running mates approved to participate in the presidential elections to be held on February 2021. Last Wednesday, Arauz called for citizen and international vigilance after his candidacy was repeatedly blocked and challenged. He stressed that Ecuador is experiencing a blow to democracy under the Lenin Moreno government, with years of political persecution and threats against any leftist candidate who runs. And Russian President Vladimir Putin has signed a law on space cooperation with Argentina. The initiative that was approved by the Russian parliament will serve to implement joint projects for the exploration and use of outer space for peaceful purposes. Through the law, ground stations of the Global Positioning System, GLONASS, will be deployed in Argentina, and an optical electrical warning system on situations of danger in space will also be installed. The commitment signed in 2019 in the city of Buenos Aires by the Deputy General Director of the Russian Space Corporation and the Executive and Technical Director of the National Space Activities Commission of Argentina. The World Health Organization's Emergency Response Chief, Michael Ryan, has expressed concerns regarding the United States government's mismanagement of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The US is accounting for a third of all world cases at the moment over the last number of weeks. The epidemic in the US is punishing. It's widespread. It's quite frankly shocking, to see 1 to 2 persons a minute die in the US, a country with a wonderful, strong health system, amazing technological capacities.
Controversial Brexit legislation allowing UK ministers to breach international law was approved by the lower house of the British Parliament on Monday. Members of the House of Commons voted to restore a clause of the UK Internal Market Bill, enabling ministers to overrule the Brexit divorce deal and privilege the trading relationship between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The clause had originally been removed by members of the upper house, the House of Lords, with critics arguing it would breach international law. The Conservative government won the vote by 357 in favour to 268 against. France is far from its goal of reducing the number of new COVID-19 infections to under 5,000 a day, the level at which the government has promised to lift the lockdown, according to a top health official.
The year-end festivities raise fears that major intra-family contaminations may occur, as this was observed during Thanksgiving in Canada and then in the United States. So I'm sending out a very clear message of prevention, caution, an appeal to common sense and to the reinforced protection of the most fragile people, our loved ones and our elderly.
In Spain, hundreds of former members of the military have criticised the government for making a pact with pro-independence forces. They even mentioned the possibility of organising a coup. Our correspondent Adriana Cardoso brings us the details from Madrid.
Several scandals have shaken the Spanish armed forces in recent days. Over 200 retired army commanders sent letters to the King of Spain and signed a manifesto assuring that the country's unity was threatened by the government's leftist coalition. The defense minister criticized the attitude of these small groups, stating it doesn't represent the Spaniard armed forces.
By using the power of a military career from which they are very far away and without defending the Catholic values, they intend to imply His Majesty, the King, by vulnerating the political neutrality which is paramount.
From within the armed forces, democratic movements claim that Franco's influence still survived within the military. After the civil war, the victorious army purged its ranks by allowing only the dictatorship's followers to enter the armed forces. For this reason, a progressive government activates the alarms.
There are many officers who still maintain the feeling of nostalgia, not exactly for a dictatorship, but for a more conservative, more nationalist, more patriotic regime.
In addition to the letters, conversations from an ex-military chat room were leaked, in which they plotted about purging the Reds and executing 26 million Spaniards. And despite having initially supported this group of retired military personnel, the ultra-right-wing party Vox has distanced itself from its discourse.
That's completely unrelated to us. It is a military chat with no boss member, deputies or affiliates with president that we know of, and therefore we have no understanding of what goes on in this chat.
The Defense Ministry asked the Public Prosecutor's Office to investigate whether this is a crime, especially not to frighten the citizenship with the threat of a coup d'etat, since it must be remembered that Spain has a tragic history of military-led protests and coup d'etat.
That the people get scared. Let's see if you are going to happen again, and not being able to tell if it was said by a small group of retired military staff or by the armed forces. That's why it's positive. The defense minister and the chief of staff have stated that it's not the armed forces.
Threats, far from being carried out, intend to involve the king in order to attack the government. A king who has not even spoken out to criticize the coup attitudes of a sector of the same armed forces of which he is the supreme commander.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto net.
Dot in the I. Saturday, only on teleSUR.
Welcome back to From the South. The opposition in Armenia announced on Tuesday that it had begun a campaign of peaceful civil disobedience after the latest ultimatum for the Prime Minister to resign was passed. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, civil disobedience actions began, which, according to the leader of the Armenian Revolutionary Federation Party, were set to last for 4 hours. The Movement for the Salvation of the Homeland, in which at least 17 opposition parties are grouped, is calling for protests on social media with full respect for the Constitution to be maintained until Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan resigns. The moves come after Pashinyan agreed to the Russia-brokered deal with Azerbaijan to end the hostilities in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Hundreds rallied in the eastern Indian city of Kolkata this Tuesday in support of farmers who launched a national day of action against reforms that deregulate the agricultural sector. Railway tracks and highways were blocked across India as farmers launched a nationwide mobilisation, upping the stakes after 10 days blockading the capital. Tens of thousands of farmers have set up barricades on roads into New Delhi since November 26, vowing not to move until the new laws are repealed, in one of the biggest challenges to the Hindu nationalist government since it was re-elected in a landslide vote in 2019. Authorities have deployed extra police in Delhi and boosted security in the rest of the country in a bid to quash the protests. The farmers were supported in their call for action on Tuesday by railway workers, truck drivers, teachers and other unions. In many eastern and western states, protesters blocked railway tracks, roads and stopped trains.
Modi and his government are trying to sell our country to the foreigners, to the Ambani Adani, and our country is leading towards the company of Raj that has been 2,000 years. This time the fight is for our independence from the Modi-Saj cabinet. Our fight is to unite the people. Today we're organizing rallies in support of the ban. Here in Kolkata, we've also organized now burned an effigy of the King of India.
A political crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo deepened on Monday as lawmakers trashed parliament after President Felix Tshisekedi moved to scrap the ruling coalition. Deputies of the Union for Democracy and Social Progress destroyed chairs and desks in the assembly following the convening of a plenary session on the management of public water and electricity companies. This came after the Congolese head of state announced the end of the ruling coalition with his predecessor Joseph Kabila. Tshisekedi on Sunday said he planned to form a new coalition and warned he might be forced to dissolve parliament and hold fresh elections in a country racked by conflict and corruption for decades. Ghanaians voted Monday in an election seen as a close fight between current President Nana Akufo-Addo and his longtime rival and former President John Mahama. The general election to choose the next president, as well as 275 members of parliament, ran smoothly, with polls closing at 5 p.m. local time. 12 candidates were vying for the presidency, but it was expected to be a two-horse race between Akufo-Addo and Mahama. According to polls, the current president is expected to win another term. Crowds gathered in the streets of the historic Jamestown area of the capital Accra as polling stations closed to celebrate another peaceful election in a country viewed as a beacon of stability in troubled West Africa. The full results of the vote are expected midweek.
Today we had an election, and we those you are seeing over here, we are supporting the new patriotic party, which is MPP. And probably we've won already, so we have nothing much to say. Total knockout.
So whether you...
These people are MPP's people. They are the disturbances. We are the NDC. They haven't finished calling the ballot papers, but they are making noise. Anti-barrels make the most noise.
Hamas said Monday it could no longer carry out novel coronavirus tests in the Gaza Strip due to a lack of kits amid a spike in cases in the occupied Palestinian territory. The health ministry called for urgent action to provide the necessary equipment to screen the population for the virus. The only lab in the territory capable of analysing COVID-19 test samples has been forced to cease its work due to a lack of equipment, according to the ministry. The shortages are thanks to the Israeli blockade of the occupied territory. A 2-week-long weekend and evening curfew was enforced across the Israeli-occupied West Bank in late November to fight a worrying spread of the virus. The curfew has been extended until December 17th. In total, the Palestinian Health Ministry has recorded more than 74,000 COVID-19 cases, including nearly 700 deaths in the West Bank. In Gaza, over 25,000 infections have been reported, including around 150 deaths. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.